The year is 2008, and in the corridors of power, from Wall Street trading floors to the West Wing of the White House, there is a single, ubiquitous sound. It is the rhythmic, plastic click of thumbs hitting a QWERTY keyboard. At this moment in history, Research in Motion, the Canadian company behind the BlackBerry, is not merely a technology manufacturer. It is a geopolitical force. The device they have created is the central nervous system of the global economy. To have a BlackBerry is to be important. To be without one is to be disconnected. The company, based in the quiet university town of Waterloo, Ontario, commands a market capitalization exceeding $80 billion. It holds 50% of the U.S. smartphone market. Its network handles the confidential communications of the G7 leaders, the global banking system, and the world's intelligence agencies. The dominance of BlackBerry is built on a specific philosophy of design and utility. It is an engineering marvel constructed around constraints. In a world of slow 2G and 3G networks, BlackBerry is efficient. It compresses data, it sips battery life, and primarily, it is a master of input. The physical keyboard is not just a feature, it is the moat. It allows executives to type long, complex emails without looking down, a skill known as blind typing. This tactile feedback, the certainty of the key press, is considered the unassailable advantage of the platform. The prevailing wisdom inside Waterloo is that the serious world runs on email, and email requires keys. The idea that a serious professional would trade the precision of a physical keyboard for a sheet of glass is viewed not just as unlikely, but as absurd. However, precisely at this zenith of influence, a decision is hardening within the dual CEO structure of Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie. It is a decision that will transform their $80 billion empire into a cautionary footnote in less than 5 years. The decision is to view the emerging era of touchscreen computing as a consumer fad rather than a fundamental shift in human-computer interaction. It is the decision to protect the legacy of the keyboard at the expense of the future of the interface. This choice is not made in a vacuum. It is the product of an organization that has become a prisoner of its own success, blinded by the very metrics that made it dominant. To understand the gravity of this error, one must look back to January 2007, when Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and introduced the iPhone. Inside Research in Motion, the reaction is not fear, but skepticism bordering on dismissal. When Mike Lazaridis pries open an early iPhone, he sees a device that breaks the rules. It consumes network bandwidth voraciously. It has a battery life that barely lasts a day. It lacks security, and most critically, it has no keyboard. To the engineers in Waterloo, the iPhone is a toy. It is a poorly optimized media player masquerading as a communication device. They calculate that if they were to put such a device on their network, it would crash their servers. They reason that carriers like AT&T and Verizon will ultimately reject this data-hungry model because it is inefficient. This analysis is logically sound, technically accurate, and strategically fatal. BlackBerry's leadership is looking at the phone as a tool for bandwidth efficiency. The market, however, is beginning to look at the phone as a pocket computer. The decision taken in the aftermath of the iPhone launch is to stay the course. Research in Motion doubles down on what they know. They release the BlackBerry Bold. It is a magnificent refinement of their existing formula. A leather back, a faster processor, and the best physical keyboard ever made. The market rewards them. Sales continue to climb. This reinforces the internal narrative that the iPhone appeals to teenagers, while BlackBerry owns the people who matter. But the ground is shifting beneath them. The introduction of the App Store in 2008 changes the nature of the device. The phone is no longer defined by its hardware features, the calls, the email, the keyboard, but by the software it can run. A glass screen is a blank canvas that can morph into a game controller, a piano, a map, or a video editor. A physical keyboard is static. It takes up 50% of the device's face forever, purely to facilitate text entry. By insisting on the keyboard, BlackBerry is physically limiting the real estate available for the application economy. They are betting that the primary function of a smartphone will remain text-based communication, even as the world moves toward visual, touch-based interaction. The illusion of stability persists through 2009 and 2010. BlackBerry is still growing in absolute numbers, expanding wildly in developing markets like Indonesia, Nigeria, and Brazil, where the data compression technology makes it the only affordable option for mobile internet. This growth in the periphery masks the rot at the core. In the United States, the high-value customers, the trendsetters, the wealthy, and eventually the corporate executives, are defecting. They are discovering that the glass slab allows them to browse the full internet, not a mobile-optimized fragment of it. They are discovering that typing on glass, while initially clumsy, comes with a predictive software layer that improves over time. The friction of the transition is temporary. The utility of the large screen is permanent. The internal culture at Research in Motion makes it impossible to pivot. The company is run by two CEOs, a structure that breeds indecision and political infighting. One faction argues for a shift to consumer-friendly features. The other argues for doubling down on enterprise security and the keyboard. The compromise is a series of half measures. They attempt to launch a touchscreen device, the BlackBerry Storm, in 2008. But because they are unwilling to abandon the tactile philosophy, they engineer a screen that physically clicks down when pressed. The SurePress technology. It is a disaster. The mechanics are faulty, the software is buggy, and the device is returned in droves. The failure of the Storm validates the traditionalist within the company. See, they argue, touch doesn't work for us. We are a keyboard company. This confirmation bias locks the door. From 2010 to 2012, while Apple and the rising army of Android devices are iterating rapidly on software, screen resolution, and touch responsiveness, BlackBerry pours its resources into the BlackBerry 7 operating system, a legacy platform that still relies on the trackpad and the physical keys navigation paradigm. They are optimizing a horse carriage while the internal combustion engine is being mass-produced next door. They believe that their stickiness, the BBM messenger service, and the corporate email addiction will hold the line. The dam breaks with the bring your own device, BYOD phenomenon. For a decade, IT departments dictated which phone employees used. They chose BlackBerry because it was secure and easy to manage. But as the iPhone and high-end Androids become status symbols, CEOs and senior partners begin to demand support for their personal devices on the corporate network. The pressure flips. Instead of IT managers forcing BlackBerries on employees, employees force IT managers to support iPhones. Once the corporate mandate evaporates, BlackBerry loses its guaranteed customer base. They are forced to compete on merit in the open market, and in the open market, nobody wants a small screen and a plastic keyboard anymore. By the time the leadership in Waterloo accepts the reality that the physical keyboard is a liability, it is too late. They begin work on a modern touch-based operating system, BlackBerry 10, but the development is agonizingly slow. The code base has to be written from scratch. The years spent defending the keyboard were years not spent building a touch interface. When the BlackBerry Z10 is finally released in 2013, a full-touch device with no physical keyboard, it enters a market that is already solidified around iOS and Android. The app ecosystem is non-existent. Developers have no interest in writing code for a distant third-place platform. The financial destruction is absolute. The company that was once the most valuable corporation in Canada sees its market share collapse from over 20% of the global market to less than 1%. In a single quarter, they are forced to write down nearly $1 billion in unsold inventory. Warehouses full of Z10 devices that no one wants. The stock price plummets from a high of over $140 to single digits. The billions in shareholder value do not just vanish. They are transferred to Apple and Samsung, who understood that the interface was the product. The tragedy of BlackBerry is not that they failed to innovate. It is that they innovated in a direction that became irrelevant. They built the perfect email machine in a world that moved on to multimedia computing. The decision to insist on the physical keyboard was not merely a design choice. It was a denial of the changing nature of information. The keyboard represented a view of the world where efficiency was paramount and work was text-based. The touchscreen represented a world where flexibility was paramount and content was visual. The executives in Waterloo were correct that typing on a physical keyboard is a superior tactile experience, but they were wrong about whether that mattered. They assumed that utility would always beat versatility. They failed to see that the smartphone was becoming a remote control for life, not just a pager for the office. By the time they looked up from their keys, the world had already scrolled past them. The insistence on the physical keyboard stands as one of the most expensive strategic stubbornnesses in business history, a reminder that in technology, your greatest strength is often the anchor that drowns you. Disclaimer. The Grid Point Zero provides technical analysis and independent research for educational and entertainment purposes only. The information presented in this video is based on publicly available data and professional projections as of early 2026. This content does not constitute financial, legal, investment, or emergency preparedness advice. The Grid Point Zero is not responsible for any actions, investments, or decisions made based on the information provided in this video. Always perform your own due diligence and consult with licensed professionals for specific advice. Understand the systems. Prepare for the disconnect.